very good evening to you. Welcome to another edition of Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Polion. We go up until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we'll be concluding with the clip that peaked. Of course, it's the eve of the island's 39th independence anniversary, and it's only appropriate that we look back at the period leading up to independence in St. Lucia and what we have achieved so far. We are graced with the presence of one of the two individuals still alive who participated in the pre-independence talks. Those who participated on the side of the government at the time would have been then Premier John Compton, also Parry Husbands, Henry Girodi, and representing the opposition, Alan Louisi, George Odlum, Evans Cauldron, as well as Peter Josie. Mr. Peter Josie is my guest on this evening's broadcast. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Tim.
Why were you opposed to independence, and what were you saying during the constitutional talks in London during those negotiations? But first, why were you opposed to independence, sir?
Before I answer that question, Timothy, I would like to pause for just a brief moment to remember the persons who represented St. Lucia at the Constitutional Conference, whose names you mentioned, and who are no longer with us. I think we owe respect to these people from both sides, and we don't do that sufficiently. I haven't seen Mr. Cauldron in a very long time, and I hope he's well. And as you know, I was invited to go with Mr. Louisi at the very first round of talks, and there were 3 rounds in all. So I went with Mr. Louisi at the first round, and at the Mr. Compton, Premier Compton, and Girodi represented the government at the first. So I was there at all 3.
Right.
And I like the difficult question that you start with, because obviously your mind has been prejudiced, and you're not trying to be critical like a lot of other St. Lucians. We were never opposed, the Labour Party, from its inception. In fact, from George Charles' era, the party's rules had always intimated that it would be for freedom. It didn't specifically mention the word independence. I was in a group called the St. Lucia Forum, where we were actually mentioning independence and things so. But at that time, it was a group people considered too radical, too black power, too pro-socialist / communist. So they were afraid of that. So it's not really true to say we were against independence. What is true to say, and that's what I want people to remember, your viewers and St. Lucians to remember, we were against the method by which Premier Compton tried to achieve independence. That was
what is the method then?
The method was to do it without full consultation of the people. I was very happy, well, I shouldn't say happy, I was relieved to hear Mr. Richelieu, one of the prominent lawyers in St. Lucia, speak about the Constitution recently. It looked like it was a rebroadcast. And talking about the Constitution and some of the weaknesses in the Constitution, precisely the kind of thing that I think we should have done 39 years ago. But there's no point looking backwards and crying over spilt milk. In the review that was almost done by Dr. Anthony before they left office, there was a team of people headed by Susie Dovine. I think there was wide consultation. They made recommendations. Obviously, some of the politicians in office and even those out of office did not seem to agree with that recommendation. So the Constitution is still in flux. It is still not amended and updated. But to answer your question directly, we were never against it. In fact, I would say that George Charles's Labour Party and the St. Lucia Forum, of which I was a part, were as much for independence as Mr. Compton, because I think, if I read Mr. Guy Ellis correctly, it seems that as early as 1964, the UWP, when it first won elections and formed the government of St. Lucia, we're talking about improved constitutional status for the island. That is why they got full internal self-government in 1967, if you recall. Mm-hmm. So it is not true to say, and it's not even a fair criticism to make. Do it right, let the people decide. That's what the Labour Party's stance was basically have free and fair consultation, find out from the people what kind of constitution they have. How do you know they will want a two-tier parliamentary system? Why do you think that they would want a Senate? Why couldn't they want different people to represent different organizations represented in the government in a way that has not been done before?
But I think, Mr. Josie, that things are always in a state of flux, and the process would have been to take St. Lucia to political independence from Britain, and going forward make the changes along the way. And even 39 years after independence, we have not done the necessary changes in terms of reforming our constitution. So it stands to reason that there would always be this hurdle, there's always be the impediment in the way of Sir John Compton going ahead and gaining political independence from Britain.
You're almost answering my question for me. You're posing the question and answering it too. And I'm putting it to you that the hardest hurdle to cross is the initial hurdle. So it's better you throw it open to the people. Do not be so arrogant as
in what form? In terms of consultation? When you say consultation, speak to the various interest groups, the various organizations.
That's correct. Ask them
parties.
what kind of constitution. Go clause by clause in the constitution. Would you like a governor general, for example, Timothy? Mm-hmm. That is a good one that comes to mind. Or would you like to have a president elected by the people?
But wasn't
how do we know?
Wasn't the SLP at the time just hell-bent, as is the case now, and just opposing the government for opposing sake? And I'm not basically taking shots at the SLP, but saying that opposition parties in St. Lucia, normally that is what they do, because the SLP at the time was saying, why not have elections, general elections, before independence?
The SLP, of which I was a part, I can speak to that. I cannot speak to any before or after my time. The SLP, of which I was a part, we were determined to give St. Lucia a constitution that would be superior to anything around us and that would make St. Lucia a better place. And I could tell you one of the ideas we had was to try to get the head of state elected for a specific length of time at a specific time of the year by all of the people. We no longer wanted Her Majesty the Queen to represent us. We didn't want a queen. And we certainly didn't want to be bogged down by something that was handed down from England, because they would always hand down to you what is made in their image and likeness. And I was so relieved to hear Richelieu, a lawyer in whom I have a lot of confidence, repeat this under the common law in England. Sometimes our own constitution could be bypassed. You know, if we go to the Privy Council, they would take what in England is practiced in the common law of England instead of recognizing the constitution.
But why wasn't a decision taken to allow then Premier John Compton to take the island to political independence, and in the event the SLP would have won the election, then change the constitution? Was that too much to ask?
I don't think that was too much to ask. As a matter of fact, it is the first time, I think, in the last 20, 30 years, I'm hearing it put that way. We, on reflection, should have done that. But when you have been in opposition for 15 years, you find a country in a particular state or stage of development, you try hard to try to mold it in the way you wanted. And maybe that's why the whole leadership thing started, because some people felt that some other people were going too slowly, etc., etc. We were not of the same minds, and that is the problem too. You have to talk and talk and talk. George Odlum and I could finish his other statements, and I think so too with Frances Mitchell, Mikey Pilgrim, and George Odlum and John Odlum and that lot. But the other members of the Labour Party were almost new, and they were talking the same old language of, you know.
But why risk all the divisiveness? Because there's a footage to show that you were part of demonstrations and people with placards, all in the run-up to the island's political independence.
Well, after a while, Timothy, we knew, not after a while, we knew from the inception that Mr. Compton as Premier could only do so much. The cards were really in the hands of the British government, specifically in the hands of the Minister for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. So all what we said and did, whether it was in Parliament or outside of St. Lucia, somehow had to reach Mr. Ted Rowlands, and that was our role, to tell Mr. Ted Rowlands, listen, look at the amount of people on this demonstration.
Who in the main would be supporters of the St. Lucia Labour Party?
Yes, And do you think that you can listen to Premier Compton, even though he has recently won an election in 74, I think it was, against those people? Because people who might not have turned out to the polls to vote. If you're going to change the constitution, maybe they didn't know a lot about it, why did they have to come and listen to the Labour Party and even start demonstrating with the Labour Party? So the Labour Party's behavior was aimed at London and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. To some extent, to St. Lucians were discontented.
But in the main, I wasn't around during that time, really. But don't you think that those who were discontented in the main would have been supporters of the St. Lucia Labour Party?
Yes, it became a political party divide. I think that is true. It's no point in denying
that. Is that really reflecting the mood of the entire the St. Lucian population at the time? Because I'm sure supporters of the United Workers' Party would have supported Sir John Compton's stance on the issue.
You are making a case against party politics, because even today, the hardcore people of the Labour Party, if they call out to a demonstration for some frivolous reason, they would go, even today. And I would think the same thing would be true about the UWP. So, you know.
That's where the whole divisiveness started, from that era before independence. The whole thing about people putting party before country.
Well, let's put it that way, Timothy. The only system of government we know is the two-party system or the multi-party system. Okay, they can be more than one, they can be independent candidates. That's the way we know it. How else would we choose our government if there wasn't some contest? Sometimes you can argue that it can be taken too far. Sometimes we don't actually argue the deep fundamental things that is troubling us. For example, you don't hear about anything about black power, the Africans in the Caribbean, black people, how they have suffered, what can be done in certain areas. Should we bring the two parties together to achieve A, B, and C? Sometimes I think we can take the partisan politics too far. If there's something good happening for the country, by which I mean some big-time investment, do we have an automatic knee-jerk reaction that because it's not my party in power, I will not support it?
But in London, during those discussions, the pre-independence period, what was the discussion like? What were you saying, for example? What was your
in London?
In London,
we were basically saying to the minister, to Ted Rowlands, who was the minister of, that listen, we understand what you're trying to do, and we understand what Mr. Compton is trying to do. What we want you to do is to test the ground. If you are as democratic as you say you are, and trust me, these are the points I was making, because Mr. Louisi probably brought me there to make those points. I was not behaving badly, but I was very strong, because when I'm representing my people, I'm afraid of nobody. So I said, listen,
and when you're representing your position as well.
My position, yes. What we have come here to do is to tell you, with all due respect, that what you want to do in St. Lucia, we understand. You just letting go these islands. As a matter of fact, towards the end, I think Alan Louisi got a little mad with me when everything was agreed and they said they're giving £50,000 to St. Lucia. I said, no, we don't want it. Well, I was in no position to agree or disagree because the Premier was in the government, Mr. Compton. And I said, if I was the Premier of St. Lucia, I would reject that offer. I would not have taken it. And I said so to Rowlands, and Louisi said, you know, tapping me and things so. So
in the end, we got the £50,000?
Yeah, we got the £50,000. And I don't even think we got it in 1 year. It was
what was it for?
That's to go and have a good time. You know, go and do what you have to do. Just leave me alone. We don't want anything. But, and the other thing too, I mean, they kept protecting, quote unquote, not protecting, but offering a fairly safe banana market until they could not do it anymore. So everything in this thing was in transition, in temporary, in flux. Nothing was concrete. The only thing that could have been concrete is if the people of St. Lucia were together. Some people say, if there's no bloodshed, if you didn't fight for something, you wouldn't appreciate it. Well, that's not really true. Sometimes you can have something which you work very hard for, right? You didn't bleed, nobody died, nobody shed blood, but you appreciate it because of the effort you put into it. And I think the Labour Party would have, the Labour Party supporters would have appreciated independence even more. Sometimes even the flag has been queried. Even the flag that I'm wearing now has been queried because it is felt that this represents only one point of view. This may or may not be true, but that is how some people see it. And you have to think and listen. You can't just dismiss it.
Do you think that the posture that was taken by the St. Lucia Labour Party, or the position taken by the SLP then, and even yourself, and it's 39 years later, you can be very frank on this particular matter, was opportunistic because the SLP wanted to win the upcoming general election. And it was posturing, it was, you know, putting on a show. There was a lot of grandstanding and maybe campaigning as well.
I don't come here if I'm not serious. And I'm not posturing and trying to put on any show. And I don't mince words when I speak. I want you to know that. I think you know that. The SLP was doing what it had to do as an opposition party. We felt that we could give the people of St. Lucia the best government they ever had. We also felt that in '74, as Mr. Compton himself might have said, there were certain cocoa macaquerie, especially in the Dennery North seat, and one or two other seats. And it was very hurtful because we felt, and I felt at the time, I've since let that go. It's immaterial now. I don't hold things for that long. That we actually ought to have formed the government.
So you guys were out for revenge?
I wouldn't call it that. I wouldn't call it that. We were fighting as hard as we could to make the point that you can't just play with us. You can't do that. You can't just play with big men as if they were little boys in the days when the colonial powers were saying there was no franchise. People 21 years, if they had to vote, they had to have some qualifications if they were to go up for elections. No, you couldn't do that with us.
So it was all about your ego as opposed
Times
to...
have changed.
Was it about your ego as opposed to representing the interests of the people?
Sometimes you have to put your ego aside and call yourself a man and stand up as a man. It has nothing to do with ego. Unless you're prepared to do that as a man, you're nobody. So it has nothing to do with ego. As a matter of fact, if you don't put your ego aside, a lot of times you may not be able to take a stand.
But I'm saying, let's hack back to the period pre-independence, 1978 into 1979. The various moves that were taken by the SLP. Did it have anything to do with ego and what you said about the outcome of the '74 general election?
It had nothing to do with that, Timothy. It had everything to do with doing it right. You cannot, as a leader, want to take the country from A to B and then do it surreptitiously, underhand manner, as we saw it at the time. You can't do that. In fact, you can with certain people, because I suspect, for example, there's a different psychology between the UWP and the SLP. If the SLP was in power or is in power, it could probably get away with murder because the UWP is very laid back. They wouldn't do anything to hurt the economy, etc., etc. On the other hand, even today, as we speak, on Wednesday, a day before the 39th anniversary of independence, there are certain elements in the St. Lucia Labour Party, and I've not been a member of that party since, God, 92, from the Library Convention. You remember that, right? We'll do worse than we ever did. But that's the psychology of the two different political parties.
But how were you feeling then about Sir John Compton, the Premier of St. Lucia at that time? What was your feeling about him?
I never had a personal relationship with Sir John.
Was that deep hatred? Was it?
No. Well, I have been warned early in politics when I went up from Asha in '72. A lot of people who didn't even know me were telling me what to look out for, and hatred was one of those things I had to put aside. But I'd always noticed, and by the way, Mr. Girodi, Henry Girodi, deceased, was married to my mother's first cousin, the second wife, Tita, who died recently, was actually my mother's first cousin. They're the children of a brother and a sister. So I saw Tita sometimes. I went there whenever I felt like going and see her, and sometimes I meet Henry there and I say hello to him and we speak. But Sir John was always a tense fella, I found. And I don't like to be around tense people. I like people who are relaxed. You understand? But when I got to know Sir John, I found him a person who was more amenable, who was more relaxed even than Henry himself. And so we became actually very close, not for a very long period because he died some years after. But I found that maybe in '92, I'll give you a story, when this thing happened at Labrie and people on the stage, I won't call any names, after the convention had elected Julian Hunt as political leader. Oh, where's Peter Josie going? That's in Creole, eh? We don't want this guy in our party. I had 25 people from Beaufort there, the delegates. They had a transit. I had my own van. When they heard that, I had taken Lawson from a bar downstairs. In fact, Rick Wayne was at that bar downstairs, Citon, for any man who from Beaufort. When the people from Beaufort heard that, they left the hall and came down the steps with me. And they said, Peter, we are going to meet Compton and Henry Giraudy now. You have to leave that party today, now. I had to calm these guys down. 3 fellas from that group stayed back. Hicks Tobias, Civilus Jeffrey, and a guy called Lubin, Michael Lubin, I think. Michael was his name, yeah. The 3 of them. The other 22 guys, plus myself, I had to go take them away from the and cool them down because they say they're not going back. When I reflect, Tim, on the politics, on how I have played it, what I did and didn't do, that is something that always comes up in my mind. That day, if I had listened to these 22 people who were so strong, and I had gone straight from there to talk to Henry Giraudy on Compton, what would have been, what would happen to me? What would have happened to me? I've always thought about that question.
What would you do differently about your involvement in the pre-independence talks and the pre-independence period, if any?
On reflection, Timothy, based on the way the parties were going, I don't think I could have done anything much. What I think I could have done, and maybe the more intelligent people in the party, was to present an alternative constitution to Ted Rowlands. I think we commented on the green paper that they had presented, etc., etc. But we ourselves as a party did not present a separate constitution. For example, the idea of a president, the idea of a unicameral house, the idea of fixed elections, date, constituency boundaries and how you change them. These things, we should have done that. And you know, one reason for that is not only going to Ted Rowlands to show that we are thinking and prepared, but also that could have formed the basis today of a document for St. Lucia to move forward. And that is something I regret, that we did not prepare our own progressive, quote-unquote, constitution. We spoke a lot around the subject, but we never had a document to show this is our intention, that is what we want our island to become if we are going to hand us independence.
Do you think that people were really interested in things of that nature at that time, in terms of getting a document, in terms of going through it thoroughly, and in terms of being impartial in coming to a conclusion as to whether St. Lucia should have attained political independence from Britain or not? Or was it basically along party lines?
Tim, most people are laid back. In St. Lucia, it's probably worse than the rest of the Caribbean. I think at the time it was due to our lack of maybe formal education. It's not that we didn't care, but people in St. Lucia, up to now, are very laid back. You call them to a meeting, things go. Even when you might be offering them little perks to attend, for some reason they find they don't attend. But I'll tell you what, one of the things I've learned in politics and in life, not only politics, in life, is that if you want something done, you have to get out and do it yourself most of the time. So if you want people to understand what you're saying and doing, sometimes you have to stand on a platform by yourself, literally. Start with 2 or 3 people, or go to homes and start talking to them. Start small. After a year, if you are determined and you're not giving up, you'd be surprised what you can do.
What if we?
But we didn't do that.
What if we had that same situation occurring in 2018, knowing everything that you're doing right now? You've gone through the era from 1979 up to 2018. How do you think this whole situation would have played out, considering that people now, people are more prone to violence, people are more aggressive, we are a bit more, even more divided? What do you think this environment, the situation have been right now, if we are leading up to independence and the atmosphere was so heavily charged, as was the case in 1978-79?
We don't have the same situation. I'm not trying to escape the question. But what I believe would happen, as much as I have very little respect, very little, for one or two persons in the leadership of the opposition party, I still believe that they have sufficient, their heirs are sufficiently to the ground that they would reach some compromise and some understanding with the other party. If it was the other way around, I think the same thing would happen if the UWP was in opposition and the SLP was in power. I think St. Lucia and St. Lucians, we say they are more violent. I don't know that that is so. We say we are this and that, but I believe, generally speaking, people are smarter. People are more exposed to news of the world. People know to a large extent what's going on. And a lot of people have worked very hard for what they have. And I don't think they would allow somebody who is in a demonstration to easily cross their fence, come and break down their thing, take over and things like what some people look like they wanted to do. But I will be quite honest with you and say that even though I have no regard for one or two politicians that are still alive and active, and it's because of what I know about them, I still believe if they're put to the test on both sides, there will be some kind of meeting of minds. The business sector, who has probably more to lose than anybody else, will literally make sure that they come together. The church, which has always tried to intervene in a peaceful way, will try to do the same thing. So I do not believe, unless, of course, something so egregious happens that the people themselves begin to take to the streets without any leaders, bypass them and things so. But I cannot see that scenario playing out.
One of two individuals still alive who participated in pre-independence talks in London in the period leading up to independence on February 22nd, 1979. Peter Josey is my guest. When we come back, why the opposition decided to boycott the actual independence ceremony. We'll be back in just a moment. Second season of News Maker Live. My name is Timothy Polion, and my guest this evening is Mr. Peter Josey. Mr. Josey, why did yourself and the opposition decided to boycott the actual independence ceremony?
Well, Timothy, the way
where there was a raising of the flag and all that.
The way the demonstrations had gone, you have to try to put yourself in the position of the opposition at the time. The way we were vehemently opposed to the methods and things, so we had the demonstrations and everything. If we had participated, it would look a little hypocritical.
Is it all about the optics? The optics.
Yeah, well, don't forget, this is about life. You know, you can't be saying one thing and thing, and the people you are speaking to who are convinced that you are sincere and truthful, next minute they see you hobnobbing with the same people who have just become prime ministers, etc., etc. It wouldn't look good. There was no vexation, and we were happy for St. Lucia. But guess what? we had our own thing. And by the way, Tim, I have written this book called Shattered Dreams. People want to know why I called it that. Because there was so much disappointment as far as I am concerned, right? A lot of the dreams I had as a young person, as a politician, burden and things, so I've expressed a lot of that in there. And on Independence Day, we actually had a gathering of our own Labour supporters in Ancillary, I think it was, etc., etc. So,
but do you regret missing such a momentous occasion, the raising of the flag, and the Prime Minister coming in, and he's handed the Constitution of St. Lucia? You were not part of this.
No.
Is worth regretting?
No. The only thing I regret, Tim, if I have one thing to regret in politics, is that when the time came for me to have led the Labour Party, for me, hopefully, to become Prime Minister, I let myself down. The people who were around me let me down. I wouldn't mind doing these things if there was something that I had to.
It's all about you, Mr. Josie. It appears it's all about you.
But let me ask you a question.
And not about country.
Let me ask you a question.
Not
this is
country.
my life.
Mm.
And I know, in analyzing my life and analyzing those I know around me who are in politics for the last 40 years, I'm almost certain from those I know that I am, was, and will be always more sincere about the development of St. Lucia than a lot of the imposters around, Timothy.
But it's not about you.
But
We focus.
No. This is not about me. I'm just saying to you, but this is my life. And I dedicated my life to doing certain things in politics. So I can't come and promote you, which is what I did too many times.
But you would be promoting St. Lucia if you had taken an active part in that ceremony on February the 22nd of 1979. Wasn't it a case of you putting St. Lucia first?
I think you're wrong.
I'm just asking.
No, but I'm telling you, your hypothesis is wrong, because we had been opposed to the methods all the time. And I repeat for the last time, we could not have opposed it all the time, and on the last day say, oh, but this is our flag, this is our country, and go. That would be hypocritical. I think you know that, and I suspect your viewers would know it too.
So it's understandable now when the opposition, the modern-day St. Lucia Labour Party, would criticize the government and decide to stay away from a particular activity.
If they feel strongly enough, fine. If they feel like not going to the House, as far as I'm concerned, that is their prerogative. But when you don't go, you're not recording in Hansard why you didn't go. At least in my humble opinion, and I don't want to tell the Labour Party how to conduct its business, there should be one person putting on record on Hansard or in Hansard why the opposition is absent. That is my personal view. Because everything that happens in Parliament is recorded in Hansard. And one day, some parliamentarian today, maybe 20 years down the road, would want to refer to Hansard and quote what was said at a particular time by himself or his colleagues.
But is it passing strange that it's such attitudes that would cause people to say that we are not patriotic and we put politics before country?
You know, Timothy, I don't think that is so. Because I'll tell you quite frankly, as much as people may think otherwise, I don't think the flag makes the country. If the people love the flag, fine. If they love the national anthem, fine. Because you know there are countries right in the Caribbean like Haiti and one or two others that have changed flags, you know, from statehood to independence and things. So the flag raising is momentous. It's an important occasion. Let's not deny that. But there are people who would look at it and don't feel anything, because they will feel that they were cheated of an opportunity to voice their opinion. And that is all we were asking for.
Would it have made a difference if Sir John Compton had consulted the people, as you put it, if there was a national consultation with the various interest groups, and the inevitable position was taken by the St. Lucia Labour Party to say, irrespective of what you say, irrespective of all the discussion, we are totally against St. Lucia attaining political independence? Would that make a difference? And Sir John still decided, because he's a very headstrong individual, and he said, we are proceeding along that particular path.
Yeah, I don't think.
Would the reaction have been different? No.
I don't think so.
So then, it was an exercise. It would have been an exercise in futility on the part of Premier John Compton. Wouldn't it have been?
Let me say something to you, and you see me smiling, almost laughing. You know, one of the things that intrigues me, and sometimes we have to think beyond what we just see with our eyes and feel with our fingers. This is the 39th anniversary of independence, right? 39 years. I believe half of the population of St. Lucia that may be looking at me right now and listening to you and looking at you were not born yet. And yet, that particular struggle, I call it a struggle, or a fight if you want. There was no bloodshed, so I don't want to call it a fight. For independence, the Labour Party stands, the opposition Labour Party, of which I was a part at the time, is still the most important issue in people's minds. Now, if you think about it, I don't care how daft you are, I don't care how much education you have or do not have, I would like you for independence to ask yourself only one question. How come, or you can ask your parents, how come after 39 years, this is still such an important issue? Why it is that the people of St. Lucia, and I include you in that, the media, the politicians, have not been able to reconcile that, get past it, and move to some new ground, especially with a new constitution, and to then start projecting the island upward and forward. I do not wish to comment on this. I just threw it out. So not you, Tim, I'm not attacking you, for people to think about. And I want St. Lucians who are watching this evening to think about it. Okay? Why is this issue so important? And I can answer. I can answer in part. It's because it has not been settled in the people's minds, even those who were not there, as you say. But in people's minds, that was not settled. And let me say something.
How can it be settled?
And let me say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Since that time, I have not been a member of the St. Lucia Labour Party from '92. I made a lot of enemies, but I took my stand. I took my position. George Worthington Kenny, he left, he came back, and people did what they think that was right for them and their country and their party. Since that time, I've been a member of the United Workers' Party. I've worked with Mr. Compton, I've worked with his ministers, I've supported Alan Chastanet. I hold no animosity, Timothy. I don't have time for that. I'm too old for that now, if you want to put it that way, against any politician. But I wasn't born exactly yesterday morning. And I know the imposters. I know the people that are there for their pockets and their pockets only.
How would you describe Sir John Compton when it comes to this observation that you're making? Was he somebody who was after material things? Was he after power? Was he for country?
Compton was one of the best examples of a person who gave of himself freely to St. Lucia. And if there's anybody you can make an example of a guy who gave, that was John Compton. In a certain way, I don't want to compare myself to anybody. I've always said to my friends and people, and I'll take the opportunity now to say, I honestly believe, Timothy, I may be wrong, but I believe in my heart that the nearest thing, closest politician after Compton, in the way Compton worked, would have been a person like myself. And the few years we spent together, it was confirmed in my mind. You know why? Compton would say to me, Peter, can you meet me at 6:30 in the morning, or sometimes 6 o'clock at such and such a place? When I reached at 10 to the time he told me, he was there. I don't know of any other politician who keeps time like Compton. And I am a slave after time. I was born at Vieux-Fort in the American era at the end of the Second World War. What time was? Everything was time, Timothy. You couldn't get anywhere late.
Do you think that certain politicians were envious of John Compton because of the power that he wielded, because of his charisma, because of the trust and the faith that the people had in him?
I'm sure there were petty jealousies, but what's the point in getting jealous of a man? Compton moved like he owned the place sometimes. He moved almost like an arrogant kind of person, you know. I know people who have a lot less than Compton and who are just as arrogant or even more. But I do not know that it made sense not liking him and things so. But I've heard people speak that way, by the way, from the George Charles era. I used to follow the Labour Party from George Charles, Olio Jean-Baptiste, and these guys. I used to go at Olio Jean-Baptiste sometimes. I know his children. And I used to have a drink with Olio Jean-Baptiste. Olio Jean-Baptiste used to be my tailor at one time. He has sewn trousers and jackets for me. So I have been in that Labour Party situation for a very long time.
But do you think that Sir John was out to prove a point? That having done so much for St. Lucia that he wanted to be the one to have taken the island to independence?
I wouldn't be surprised if that was in his mind. And at one time, and I can say it now, tonight, I can say it again, if you're looking at things individually and personally, I think that was a good point. Because he had won 3 consecutive elections, you know, and the British, even though Compton and the people and the Labour Party and the opposition didn't think so at the time, I was almost certain at the time, because I used to read a lot, keep in touch with what's going on. I still do as much as I can in reading, right? At the time, I am almost certain the British government wanted to give Sir John, or Premier Compton if you want, the leadership of the country as a reward for his good stewardship of St. Lucia.
Because it was a safe pair of hands compared to the radicals, Peter Josie and George Odlum?
I don't like the way you're describing me, but I'll let that pass. But you know what?
But I would be the first person to describe you as a radical then.
You cannot know how safe my hands are. So that is prejudging, and you're prejudicing your viewers.
I'm just asking the question.
Compton might have had a safe pair of hands, but you know, it's like comparing Garfield Sobers and Darren Sammy. I have seen both of them play, and it's not a fair comparison. You understand? Anyway.
Meaning what? Who was Gary Sobers in that analogy? Who would have been Sir Gary Sobers, and who would have been Darren Sammy when you're talking about Sir John Compton and Peter Josie?
There was nothing to compare with Gary Sobers. At the time, you could say there was nothing to compare with Compton, but Darren Sammy obviously knew his worth, and he has proven it. And you know what? Times change. I'm sure Darren Sammy made about 10 times more money out of cricket than Sobers would ever make. You understand? But Premier Compton at the time was safe. He did his British thing with the British government. There was no...
He had a track record?
He had a track record. There were no obvious corruption. And the British government always took care of every dollar, every pound that they gave to these islands in those days. He handled the banana business, although the environment got messed up. I think we used too many chemicals. But all that was overlooked because the banana industry laid the foundation for everything St. Lucia is today, especially in the rural areas. I mean, you are not old enough to know that, but I can remember how Vieux Fort, all of my father's people are from Grace, Vieux Fort North. I remember the little village of Labrie, where all of my mother's people are from, right? I am personally from the town of Vieux Fort, but I traveled to Castries quite often in those days, and I saw the dilapidated houses all along the coast where the bus was traveling. And bananas changed that, the income from bananas. And Compton, Son Mitchell, Eugenia Charles of Dominica, those 3, they did everything in their power to keep the banana market, right? So that was very, very important. The farmers worked hard. Sir John didn't do it on his own. He had the support of the farmers. And you know what? To fast forward to the future, when Sir John was replaced by the Labour Party, all the intellectuals, they saw the banana industry going down. They kicked it down the road and allowed it to fall on its own weight. And you know, they were afraid of saying to the people, our new industry, our new money earner will be tourism. We were in an ambivalent situation. We were not sure whether we were coming or going, and nobody can deny that. Today, if Alan Chastanet, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, is successful, it's because he has realized, listen, these guys bananas are going to take a little time, tourism is going to take a little time, but tourism is so important now in the world, and I know it better than I know bananas. I am going to place emphasis on that. So you can't fault the man for that. And Ezekiel is an experienced Minister of Tourism now. He has helped. If we can bring the banana industry back, as Mr. Shastri and his Minister of Tourism focus on tourism, I can tell you, I see St. Lucia being a very sweet place in about 3 or 4 years' time.
When we come back, we'll continue to focus on independence. Was it worth it? What have we achieved 39 years after we went down that road? Back in a moment with my guest, Mr. Peter Josie. Welcome back. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. It's the Eid of the Island's 39th independence anniversary, and my guest is Mr. Peter Josie. He participated in the various discussions in London in a run-up to February 22nd of 1979. 39 years later, sir, do you think we have anything of note to show for having taken that plunge?
I think, Timothy, the best thing we have is the pride of our people and the way the youth of St. Lucia is turning out to be more progressive, more determined to succeed. I hear about the road fatalities. I read about the violence last year, the number of deaths, and I am more saddened by those who try to aggrandize that or to make it look as if, boy, where is St. Lucia going with all of those deaths? Instead of trying to be analytical, why are there so many? Are all of those deaths just bare violence, hatred? Is it family business that has gone wrong? Are there emotional things, etc., etc.? I have a lot of confidence in the young people of St. Lucia. And I believe St. Lucia is unique. And I discovered that a long time ago, when I personally was still very young. Sir Arthur Lewis, Derek Walcott, and names like that were very important in the Caribbean. And there are people in the Caribbean from bigger islands, bigger countries. I'll never forget, I attended a seminar once in Barbados, and I was speaking, answering a question and making a statement.
In what capacity, as a government minister?
No. Okay. That's not, as a trade unionist.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And a guy from Jamaica, afterwards, a senior guy, approached me. He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from St. Lucia." He said, "Man, I like the way you speak. You speak like you know what you're talking about, like a person who has read, who is educated and things." So I said, "Well, that is true about a lot of St. Lucians. It's true that some of us, have Creole and some of us didn't go to school. But I said, when you have a St. Lucian who has been given an opportunity, he can match or she can match anybody in the Caribbean. I believe that 40 years ago. I still believe it today. And I believe independence has made us that. Part of the reason is independence. We don't have people hanging over our heads telling us what to do, what budget to pass. This is in our hands now, and it's always good. We are talking about education. That is my pet subject, even though my first love has always been agriculture. I love plants, I love animals, and I studied that. I believe I understand a little of how to make both of them grow. But I've always believed that education is the foundation of any nation. And we have done so well, and I put a tick for all of the governments we have had since independence. We have done so well in building schools. We probably have not done sufficiently well in tweaking the curriculum to suit. I believe, as I think I was telling you the other day for radio, that we should be emphasizing more on technical subjects to work with our hands, because not everybody is academic. Not everybody has the same ability to retain things and to regurgitate on paper. Even sports, as we're doing so well these days, there's a lot of miles to cover in sports. But I think we could have one of these schools that are becoming vacant. We have built so many that now we have more school space than students.
Just, I was watching an interview to coincide with the 25th Independence Anniversary of St. Lucia. That interview is conducted by Mr. Robert Lee with Sir John Compton. And Sir John Compton took the opportunity to credit Mr. Alan Bousquet with having laid the foundation for the success that we are reaping right now in education, in terms of the constructions of schools and so on. Because you're saying after independence, they were mulling over what should be done in terms of the development of St. Lucia. And Mr. Alan Bousquet, to his credit, stated that emphasis should be placed on education.
Yeah, well, that is true, Timothy, but I'll tell you something, there's a big minus sign. And I hope the UWP supporters don't mind me saying that, because I want to be extremely frank, you know, and very frank and truthful. I believe the UWP has a big minus when it comes to technical education. As a young college boy, I remember the time just before I left St. Mary's College that George Charles and the Labour government had actually built this big place that was supposed to become a technical wing of St. Mary's College. It might not have been Compton's fault. Let me make an excuse for him. It might have been the kind of bourgeois mentality they had in the Castries area, those half-brown people that think they're white, you know, and supported UWP at the time in Compton. They didn't want technical hands-on education to mix up with St. Mary's College, because St. Mary's College was a pure, you know, brothers, white, that nonsense. That was my understanding at the time anyway. And that is one of the biggest mistakes we ever made in St. Lucia in education. George Charles had built it. This thing was going to be working like a miracle, right? In terms of training young people in woodworking, carpentry, in mechanical arts, how to fix engines and things, how to build things, you know? And it was stopped. And I've never forgotten that. If Mr. Bousquet, whom I knew personally, I'm sure you know that, and I sat many sessions in the house with him as Minister of Education. And I must say he was one of the hardest ministers to criticize. One, because he was such a genuine guy, spoke well to everybody, laughed well with everybody. When we went upstairs for a coffee at a coffee break or some water or whatever, he was always one who would approach you, unlike Compton, by the way. And he was so precise and knew his work so well. I guess he had good permanent secretaries too. Mr. Leighton Thomas was one of his PSs, preparing the thing for him and defense and everything. Plus, if you're building schools for school children and you believe in education, there cannot be much to criticize him about. So I would agree with you that he was very good, but the UWP, I'm not even sure if Mr. Bousquet was part of it yet as Minister of Education. St. Mary's College, I've never forgotten that. They should never have closed down that technical wing of St. Mary's College. A lot of people in St. Lucia don't know that, because I'm talking about 1958, 59, around that time. So that's some years ago. You know, so I am not exactly a spring chicken, but I thank God for my age, because that is one of the positive things. At my age, Tim, I know a lot of things about St. Lucia and St. Lucian politics that the younger generation either don't know, or they don't want to know, or the older ones have forgotten.
Can we do more to educate our young people about our history? Independence, pre-independence period, among other things.
I think so. One of the things I believe we're not doing sufficiently well is to use the things that young people like. A music festival, right? Use the music festival and offer tickets to people, young people who answer questions. One. Secondly, make it a music festival for people who are at school and doing well. Or it doesn't have to be a music festival. Something that you would be recommending and recognizing, that's the word I'm looking for, not recommending, where you'll be recognizing young people who are performing well. Just like presently, the sports associations people, they're recognizing excellence in sports. I think we should also recognize excellence in school, whether it is hands-on, whatever. And I believe some means must be found. I'm sure there's this talent. A lot of trained teachers in St. Lucia, people with, some means must be found to use the things that young people like to educate them in history. The computer can be used to educate them in history. Where do we start? Maybe we can start in recent history, like adult suffrage. What's adult suffrage? Why is it that people couldn't vote? But one of the things we must not be afraid of, Timothy, and we must always face it, is that we St. Lucians and the Caribbean people were always at a disadvantage. We cannot use that as a badge to say that we're not going forward. And we can't bellyache and bellyache. It's 39 years of independence. We can't continue to cry and bellyache. But at the same time, our young people must know that things have not been easy for a lot of people, a lot of parents. They have been tough, right? And it doesn't matter which parent you see. Only about 10% of the people of St. Lucia, the parents of St. Lucia, who in the 80 and going, were able to comfortably send their children to school, as far as I can tell. All of us, my father, all of them had the challenges. My father was a simple fireman, but he insisted that I go to college. He had to transfer his house. He had a wooden house at before, break it down and bring it to Rockhall Road in Raffin 212 in Castries to accommodate me, because he didn't have a chance to go. He wanted to go. His father was either not interested or whatever. And he said, no, my son is going. And that is why I dedicated the book I just showed you a while ago to him and my mother.
Where do you think we have fallen short since independence?
I think.
What do you think we should have achieved between 79 and 2018?
I think there should be more civility, more meeting of minds within politicians. I think they're more qualified fellas now. They know each other. There's no radical, quote-unquote, Peter Josie. There's no George Odlum. Those days I was hoping would be over.
But we'll discuss that in just a moment. We're due for a break. Once again, you're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. My guest is Mr. Peter Josie. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Polion, and my guest is Mr. Peter Josie. Mr. Josie, just before we took the break, we were talking about civility. More civility in St. Lucia is certainly needed, and that is something that is lacking on the island, especially when it comes to what? Politics and politicians?
I think so.
Go ahead.
I think a lot of the people are ahead of the politicians when it comes to that. One of the things I must observe, Timothy, and I hope I'm not being biased, in fact I know I'm not being biased, is that Alan Chastanet, Prime Minister, has bent over backwards to be nice and civil to all the politicians in opposition, those who oppose him. He has. He has gone as far as doing something which, if any Labour Party politician were to do it, the party would probably crucify him or her, because of the way the party has, focused its mind on the narrowness of the politics. And that is, I'm sure you have seen it, occasionally you see Alan Chastanet wearing a red tie. You would never see a member of the opposition wearing a yellow tie, even as a joke. You understand? And so Alan is bending over backwards, but it takes two to tango. It takes two to quarrel, but one to stop it. Alan is trying his best to think. And I think unless we can do that and mature sufficiently to come together at crucial moments where it is important for the country, and to put our own little egos, our own little divisiveness aside, it will not work.
So in that regard, although we are 39, we are just not mature, we are immature.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that is a nice way to put it. You can be 39 and be stunted as a child and have the mind of a child. Unfortunately, it is that way. So I believe, and the thing is, Sometimes I wonder if it's the lack of confidence that does that. I don't know the answer for certain. But if you are totally confident in yourself, and you're totally confident in the persons who vote for you, and you can speak to them, I don't think there's need to grant charge to be afraid to speak to anybody, Timothy, including the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, or anybody.
Still on the subject of independence, and how do you think we have independent thinkers among us?
I think there are very few.
And can you identify a few?
I think there are very few.
The few, can you make reference to them? Can you identify them? Can you identify at least 5 independent thinkers in St. Lucia, apart from yourself?
I can't think of any, and those that I can think of may not want me to mention their names because they're not in politics. Let me see.
No, we're just talking in general terms.
Yeah, I know.
About independent thinkers on the island.
But I don't know if people, people can be funny. Let me see if I can think of one who would not want to name the names mentioned. But you'd be surprised. There are 1 or 2, but I must say not many within politics. If I were to choose one politician whom I suspect, I cannot put my head on a block and say that she's 100%. I suspect it would be the Minister of Sports.
Fortuna Belrose.
Fortuna, I would think,
is an independent thinker.
Would come closest to what I believe is an independent thinker. I would give Spider 50-50.
But people are not politicians. I'm sure we have some people who are independent thinkers who are not politicians.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. I can think of 1 or 2. I know 1 or 2 women off the bat, but I don't know that they would want me.
No, but we're not talking politics. We're
Doesn't
talking
matter.
about we're talking about in general.
People are very
in
funny.
general.
No, I don't want to
independent thinkers. Those are your thoughts. You're an independent thinker. Those are your thoughts.
Yeah.
So you're not trying
Timothy,
to put Mr. Josie, you're not trying to put anybody on the spot. This is what you think. I believe that Dr. Stephen King is an independent thinker. Dr. Stephen King is an independent thinker.
I would support that.
Yeah.
So
give me one.
So is his wife, by the way.
I've given you one. Dr. Stephen King is an independent thinker.
I give you his wife.
No.
I give you his wife. His wife is one.
At the back of behind every successful man is a woman. So that's automatic, sir.
I don't know if Dr. King would agree to that.
That's automatic. But
Timothy, I'll tell you frankly, I wrote a nice article once.
But we're still talking about an independent thinker.
Hold on. I wrote a nice article once on somebody who had served St. Lucia, not in politics, in the private sector, and had resigned. I knew that person. We sat, how they call it, Cambridge thing together. And she said, yes, you can write it and things like that. When I was about to publish it, she called me and said, you know what, Peter, don't do it. I said, why? I don't want people to think that I'm looking for anything and that. I don't want to call any names, Timothy, but Dr. King is a good person. I will not.
But
maybe at some future time.
No, but you speak. Who knows? This might be the last program that will be focusing on independence. The last appearance, maybe, on such a program.
There's always another, but you know what? I admire your tenacity. That's very good. I didn't know you were that way.
The next 39 years, what do you want for St. Lucia?
I would like to see St. Lucia awash with work for young people. I would like to see St. Lucians maybe the brightest in the Caribbean. The one thing I would like to see St. Lucians do, which they're not doing properly as yet, as far as I'm concerned, is to embrace people from outside. We need cross-fertilization if we are to progress.
But it has been stated that we love foreigners. We open our arms and our doors to foreigners compared to our attitude towards indigenous solutions.
That's not really true. Not if we think foreigners are making money and taking jobs from us and things so. These are transient things that will go away. I want to tell those who may not like foreigners that. And sometimes people actually shelter or hide behind politics to do that. But I would say categorically we need to embrace foreigners, especially our Caribbean people. And it doesn't matter where they're from. And they could be of any color, including white. Because as I tell people, there are very few people who are more suspicious of people of the Caucasian race because of what they have done to black people. But I'm also very much aware that in Martin Luther King's March on Washington and all of the things that happened from, in the U.S. slavery, there were always white people who were helping to make the lives of black people better, always. So you cannot just look at a white person and dismiss them. So if you get help from white, yellow, brown, black, I think that's something we need to do, to embrace positively, especially if it's people that are coming to invest, help us develop, help educate our people. That is what I would like to see, and to see a cross-fertilization of St. Lucians and a better, more educational, uplifting, upwardly mobile people in the Caribbean and around the world. That is, I would really like to see that for our country, so that if by some reason God were to send me back after 39 years, I would not want to recognize St. Lucia except for the geography.
In the last 39 years, what do you think has stood out? What's the one thing, as far as you are concerned, really stands out for St. Lucia as far as our achievement is concerned?
I think we celebrate independence regardless of which government is in office, with a lot of patriotism. And I think, I have not had an opportunity to say that, but I think Dame Paulette Kwesi helped in the last 20 years. We did that. We are all, once it came to that, we were all united, and I pray and hope that under the present Governor General, we can continue, you know, at independence, at national events, to cement as one body, even though some people spoke negatively, but no one stays in power or in the Governor General's seat forever. And I believe we should respect the Prime Minister's choice, support him as best as we can. When the next elections come, we'll see what we do. As a matter of fact, I was very heartened when I saw Jimmy Fletcher sitting in the chair here with you and saying almost the same things. We fight our politics hard, but after elections, we should all batten down and say, this is our country. And I've always felt that way. I have no animosity against anybody. I don't care what party you support.
But you're a man of principle, and you just made reference to the new Governor General. You were once a strong supporter and member of the St. Lucia Labour Party, and you also served alongside the current Governor General, Sir Neville Emmanuel Snack. What was your feeling then when Mr. Snack decided to change allegiance in 1987 after the true general election? Because that is very much part of our history. And also I'd like to say, Mr. Josie, that the young people who are watching this broadcast right now, they're not aware of what transpired then. So it's worth speaking about it. What was your feeling then in 1987? What was your feeling at that time?
Timothy, I was as mad as hell. I was probably more vexed than Julian Hunt at the time. It's because I have taken politics more seriously, I believe, than a lot of these guys, you know? And to have just waltzed across the floor like that. And I suppose that's why I didn't want to leave that day in 92, as I told you, from thing and go straight to thing, because it would be like waltzing across the floor as well. But Nevis, Snack, and myself at one time worked very well together. And I must tell you, for the record, when he became leader of the opposition, he actually called me and offered me a senatorship. He wanted me to become one of the senators of the opposition Labour Party. I don't remember why now, but I said, Neville, there are other guys, you know, because I didn't want people, in my mind, to get used to the idea of, oh, Josie is just a senator. I always wanted to, if I'm a senator, I want to be a senator of the government in power, so that the Senate, the Prime Minister can use the Senate to give me a ministry if it is fit. That's the only thing I would want in the Senate. You understand? I have nothing against the Senate, but I think it doesn't serve any useful purpose in St. Lucian context. And I thought there were other people who were in the party before me. Give them some, you know, how they call it, some thing to be happy about. You know, the old stalwarts of the old days. So I didn't ask. He came to me. In fact, I've never asked, and I'm very proud of that, you know, Timothy. I've never asked any Prime Minister, leader of the opposition, anybody for any position. When Sir John became Prime Minister again in 2007, I think it was, or 2006?
2006.
He called me I said, Peter, I want to see you in my office tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. I said, okay, I'll be there. He said, by the way, Ezekiel will be there too. I said, that's fine. I was there at 10 to 7. I went up. I saw himself and Ezekiel sitting there. I had not known John Compton that well, but we had spoken, and you get to know people better when they oppose you sometimes, if you're looking and listening to what they're saying, not because they oppose you to think that there's no good in that person. And that was one of the things, the qualities between Compton and myself. Even though we opposed each other, I always saw the lion in Compton, and I guess he also saw some good in me. And when I reached there, he said, I want you to help Ezekiel in the Ministry of Agriculture for me. I want you to be on the banana board. I want you to be on the Windbrand board. And he had the letters prepared. I said, sir, to make sense on the Windbrand board, I should also be on the shipping board. He said, oh yes. That time Ezekiel is sitting there, you know.
But back to Mr. Snack. Why were you mad as hell, as you put it, when he crossed the floor? When he
because we just forget, it was 2 elections, I think, at the time, and the elections were tight. And I was keeping my fingers crossed. I got a feeling then, I have to tell you, and that feeling is still true today. I still feel so today. I got a feeling then, I feel so now, that the people of St. Lucia would not have voted Compton out of office to make Julian Hunt the leader of the country. I don't think they would do that. I'm not sure if they would do it for Neville Snack, but I still feel Neville had a better chance. So Neville, it seems, I wasn't privy to that conversation, but he told me that he had asked Julian because Julian wanted a shadow ministry, a shadow cabinet.
Yeah.
So I'll be shadowing agriculture, different people. And Neville wanted to shadow foreign affairs. And Julian thought that was too much to give him. And here was John Compton offering him the real thing, a minister of foreign affairs. And Julian was denying him, so he told me, I wasn't there. So I was not totally surprised. I thought he would have given us some hint that he was doing that. But you know, that's how the cookie crumbles. And life is funny. I didn't like what he did at all. And in fact, some people many years later were trying to compare what I did to him. I sat in Parliament for 4 years before making my move. Luckily, God was on my side, as he always has been, and that is something I haven't done sufficiently. Praise God in everything I've done in politics and in my life to a large extent. I have always felt the blessing of God on my side. And you know what? When Dr. Lewis became Prime Minister, he called me. Again, I didn't call him. We had about 3 different meetings, 3 separate meetings, at Udovic's place, at the back of the Mon. Put his cards on the table.
But on the morning, you would have been in Parliament in 1987.
I was there, of course.
And you saw Mr. Snack.
I saw when he walked. He just walked in and walked straight to next to Compton.
What was the feeling?
I told you I was
what was going through your mind at the time?
I didn't want to kill him. I had no idea, but murder didn't come to my mind.
You're asking yourself questions. You're saying what's going on.
Let me tell you, I don't know if Julian remembers. I was sitting to the immediate left of Julian Hunt, who was then leader, right? I said, Julian, let us all get up and go on the same side. Let's all get up and go on the same side. Let's stand behind Compton and Neville and all of them. So all of us are in the government now. Let's make a papi show out of it. I told Julian that. I think it would have been a good papi show, you know, taking the thing to just laughing at it. But I didn't like it. I was mad as hell. And you know what? After a while, I said, boy, Peter, you talk about self-interest and ego. Everybody does, Tim, in the final analysis with what is in their interest. If your people are suffering and that is how you feel you could help them, but if you're genuine, I think you could say something to your colleagues and say, listen, Julian, I don't like what you did. Look, Mr. Compton is offering me A, B, C, and I'm asking you to put me as shadow minister. There's no money involved. Compton is offering me a ministry. where I'll be at the United Nations. I'm traveling all over the world.
But in some sense, we all are looking after our own interests and so on. But don't you think that we must have some kind of integrity when we're taking
you can't be a prostitute.
Positions?
You cannot be a prostitute. You should never be a prostitute. Mind you, I think the prostitution is one of the oldest and sometimes the noblest in the world. I see you smiling as if you know what I'm talking about. That's good.
No, because I've heard this before.
I see. I like how you're laughing. So I have nothing against prostitutes. Nothing at all. People have to earn their keep, and if that's all they can do, they provide a good service for people who need them. But it should not enter the vocabulary of a politician, and I'm talking about men now, not women, to prostitute themselves. You know, it's not good. As Brother George would say, for a mess of pottage. But most times, they did it for good food instead of...
So you do not believe that Mr. Snack prostituted himself, no?
At the time? The offer that was made for him, Tim, I think it would be very difficult based on what had transpired between himself and Julian, if I'm to believe him at the time. Right? It would be difficult. I was vexed like hell, as I said. I used the word mad. But as he explained later to me, I could understand, especially when I saw and knew in my heart, and I still feel so today. I have nothing against Julian. Julian and I have had a very good relationship. When he was president of the West Indies Cricket Board, he never had an event in St. Lucia at the Darren Summit Stadium if he didn't invite me. I played cricket with Julian many, many years ago on the same team, Notre Dame. So we have known each other, and that is another thing. You know, people don't know how far some of us go back, you know, and all the headache I say sometimes you tend to think, you shouldn't worry that.
But how soon after that move did you speak to Mr. Snack?
Oh my goodness. You know, I can't recall, but it could not have been a long time because Mr. Snack's elder brother, Winston, I always had a lot of respect and time for. And I was still, George and I were not as close, but George Odlum, I'm talking about, was always close to Winston. And because of George, sometimes I saw Winston, I went to him. And I used to meet Neville once in a while at Winston's office.
Recently, he was appointed Governor General of St. Lucia. What was your feeling? Considering all what transpired in 1987, the crossing of the floor and so on, and now being made Governor General of St. Lucia. How did you see that appointment?
I didn't see it coming. As a matter of fact, somebody asked me. I didn't see it coming at all. But I must say again, I have to speak the truth. I left the island on the 20th of December last year.
My birthday.
Your birthday. Or you're born close to the Jesus Christ that I follow. And about 4 days before I left, or maybe 5, I got a call from Neville Snack. He said to me, Peter, I want to invite you to my investiture. Now, I'd heard rumors and things, you know. So I said, what investiture? He said, but haven't you heard? I said, no. I'm going to be made Governor General, and I'm inviting you to the investiture on the 1st, I think he told me, of January. I'm sure he said the 1st. I said, you know, Neville, I would like to come, but I'll be off island, and I'm not coming back before the middle of January or even a little later. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. And we had 1 or 2 little light conversations and things. So before that, we hadn't spoken for a number of years. But he told me at that time, well, I'm reading all what you write. And one of the things I've never forgotten is how highly you spoke about my brother, Winston. Yeah. I'd liked Winston, and he was a nice guy. So that was our last conversation. I haven't seen him because I don't want to call to congratulate him. I think I should do that as a former parliamentarian, but I think I have to wait until I see him personally. And I don't want to go there without invitation. So that will happen in time. But he did call me to tell me. People ask me, but Peter, whom do you think should be? I had my own take.
Well, that is not a question, but the question is your thoughts on him being appointed Governor General.
Oh, I didn't care one way or the other because I had heard about months before that Dame Paulette Rizzi would have left anyway, even though the Labour Party was in office. She, from what I heard, wanted to leave after 20 years. She wanted to. So whichever party was in office, I think Dame Paulette Rizzi might have left. What is not in doubt at all is if the Labour Party was in office, the Governor General would not be Neville Snack. What I feel about it, Timothy, I tell people, and I repeat to you what I say to people, it's neither here nor there for me. I'm happy for Neville because of him, his children, his family. His wife, I find, is a particularly sedate person, nice person. I don't know his children so well. I've read what the first daughter has written. I knew the first daughter was close to Sir John and wanted to contest for the UWP, and I always respect that. Anytime any person throws their heart into the political ring, Timothy, I have a lot of respect, because politics is not easy. People will curse you, they'll say things that they don't know about you, they'll invent lies. So it takes a brave soul to throw their heart in the political arena, and I wish we had more young people with integrity, mind you, more young people of integrity doing that for St. Lucia.
But you said it's a good thing for Sir Neville Snack and his family. It's a good thing for St. Lucia, you think?
I think so, because I tell you what, Neville Snack is not going to rock any boat. He's not going to do anything that will disrespect the opposition. In fact, it was interesting. God, where was I? I actually heard part of his statement when he was sworn in at the House of Assembly in Parliament. I don't think he'll do anything. That's not his nature anyway, to rock the boat. He's not going to insult the Labour Party in any way. He certainly is not going to do anything to hurt the government. I think he's going to give the government his best advice, if asked, and I think he's going to give the Labour Party, especially the leader of the opposition, his best advice, if asked. I honestly believe that.
Final comments from you, sir.
Timothy, I came here hoping to say this in the final comment. A lot of people believe that Martin Luther King's best speech was the one at the Washington Monument, I Have a Dream. For me personally, my preference is a small speech he gave when he adopted a poem by one guy named James Russell Lowell, an American poet who was a critic and a diplomat. And I want to quote this from Martin Luther King for the politicians who were there and those who might come. And I want to say a few words to the youth of St. Lucia, very briefly. So let me quote what Martin Luther King quoted, and which is the part of all of the things he has said. That is what I love the most. Once to every man and nation comes a moment to decide. In the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. Some great cause, God's new Messiah, offering each the bloom or blight. And the choice goes by forever, twixt that darkness and the light. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet the truth alone is strong. Though her portions be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong, yet that scaffold swears the future, and behind the deep unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. This is almost like a prayer for me. I believe in that God is always in the shadows, keeping watch above his own. And to the youth of St. Lucia, Tim, I want to say this. The nation has been described by some political economists as the individual writ large. At 39, an individual may be entering the most productive phase of his or her life. So too should the nation. But at 39, have we St. Lucians, as a nation, been able, or have we learned to keep our environment clean? Something as basic as that. Have we learned to dispose of our garbage properly. And I'm speaking about the youth of the nation, not to adults. We are now entering a period in our history when we must examine anew our national character and to seriously consider what kind of nation we wish to be. The presence of falsehoods in the form of distorted moral values and dishonest leaders are factors that scar our God-given humanity, which is noble and just. Sadly, there are still too many impostors and crooked operatives aspiring to positions by which to enrich themselves. There are still too many people who are afraid to make hard decisions which might be unpopular at the moment, but which is good for the country in the long run. Finally, I was in Trinidad at the independence when Eric Williams, the Prime Minister, told the youth of the nation to remember that in their school bags, they carry the future of their country. These are inspiring and profound words by Eric Williams. And I end with a quote from John Lovell again. Books are the bees which carry the quickening pollen from one to another mind. Let me repeat that. Books are the bees which carry the quickening pollen from one to another mind.
Quite profound, sir. Thank you so much for my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live.
You're most welcome.
Happy Independence Anniversary to you, sir, as well as to the entire nation. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for a clip that peaked, and it features a report extracted from a GBN broadcast over in Grenada, because that island incidentally recently observed its 44th independence anniversary, and it's very interesting. Take a look.
The parade consisted of 6 armed members of the Royal Grenada Police Force and 6 unarmed factions, inclusive of Cadet Corps, St. John's Ambulance Brigade, and the Presentation Brothers College Boy Scouts, among others. Leading the Royal Grenada Police Force marching band was Constable 771 Gregory McLean. Their presentation was one of the more outstanding spectacles of the day. Not to be undone, the male armed members of the RGPF had much up their sleeves. Her Majesty's Prison was not to be left behind as they entertained the crowd with their display for the first time. Commitment was further tested as they withstood heavy torrents of rain that blessed the occasion.
Stand easy.
The response from the crowd, however, should be sufficient gratification after weeks of training, and the 44th Independence Anniversary celebrations is one many say would undoubtedly linger on in memories. Blossom Alexis Welsh, GBN News.
Hope you enjoyed the clip that peaked. Once again, thank you so much for watching the broadcast. Happy Independence Anniversary to you, St. Lucia, and here's a very good evening. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Good night.